History loves a good mystery. Someone could dig something strange out of the ground, give it a dramatic backstory, and people will line up to see it. Museums will display it, and believers will swear that it changes everything that we thought we knew. There's also plenty of YouTube videos talking about that shit. The thing is that a lot of these discoveries just fall short the moment someone actually, looks a little bit closely. What seemed miraculous turns out to be man-made, suspiciously convenient, or if we're being really, really honest, just rather profitable for whoever's charging admission. But look, here's where things get strange. Exposure does not kill the mystery. People have shown that they will travel great distances and at great expense to see it for themselves, still buy tickets, still donate money, and still defend the legends long after the hoaxes have been revealed because people are broken. But really, it's just because the truth is boring and the story is simply too good to let go of. We humans, we're hardwired to believe in hoaxes and conspiracy theories, and the science backs this up, according to Loyola University of Chicago, among others. So, let's look at 5 of history's most famous mysteries that turned out to be hoaxes. And if you think these fakes faded from history once the truth came out, think again. Like I said, we're broken. Just before we get started today, a quick word from today's fantastic sponsor, Huel. And their black powder edition, a complete meal that you can make in about 30 seconds, and here's one I made earlier. Huel isn't a protein shake, it is real food balanced with protein, carbs, fats, and fiber. Each serving has 40 grams of protein, 27 minerals, and 0 artificial sweeteners. It's gluten-free, it's plant-based, and honestly, it's one of the few things that keeps me full while I work. It's also, nutritionally balanced, other than, compared to the other things that might keep me full while I work, like pizza. I usually have it for lunch. It's I'm busy at work. I just like to shake it up and have it at my desk because, I don't know, I just work. Coffee flavored caramel is fantastic. It's all fantastic. This is chocolate flavor, actually, and that's what I've been on lately, and I rather enjoy it. So if you want to try it yourself, head to huel.com/SP15 and use the code SP15 for 15% off if you're a new customer. That's huel.com/SP15. Fuel your best performance with Huel Black Edition. And now, today's episode. The Crystal Skulls. Few artifacts have captured imaginations quite like the crystal skulls. They started appearing in the late 19th century, usually advertised as relics of the Maya or Aztec world. Believers swore that they had mystical powers, carried hidden knowledge. Right, yeah, in crystals. And maybe even provided contact with beings from beyond this planet. Well, that was definitely true. The real story, of course, is far less cosmic and far less filled with bullshit. 19th century Europe was in the grip of 2 powerful forces, a hunger for exotic relics and a fascination with the supernatural. Museums were expanding rapidly, competing with one another to fill their halls with treasures from faraway lands. At the same time, spiritualism swept through parlors and drawing rooms with seances and mediums claiming to channel voices from beyond the grave. A carved skull made of crystal seemed to satisfy both appetites at once. It looked ancient and mysterious, and it invited mystical interpretations about death, life, and hidden knowledge. Into this climate stepped Eugène Bourbon, a French antiquities dealer who knew exactly how to play that game. Bourbon lived in Mexico for a decade as Maximilian's official archaeologist, later using that credibility to sell artifacts to Paris. It was through Bourbon that the first crystal skulls appeared in Europe, gleaming objects that seemed both artistic and otherworldly. From Paris, they moved into prestigious collections, including the British Museum and the Musée de l'Homme, and eventually into the Smithsonian in Washington. And by the way, I'm absolutely guessing at these French pronunciations. I'm just thinking about how you say croissant, and just doing that. I'm sorry, French people. Please forgive me. Each was proudly displayed as a genuine relic of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. Not one had a verifiable excavation history, because he just made it up, did he? Let's find out. They did not come from carefully documented digs, but from the hands of dealers. At a time when archaeology was still a young science, this did not stop curators from labeling them as sacred treasures. For decades, the skulls were accepted as authentic, with some claiming that they were ritual tools storing lost wisdom. Writers speculated that they had lost knowledge of the Maya or Aztecs, knowledge far in advance of what historians believed those cultures possessed. Wait, didn't the Aztecs not even have the wheel? What technology would you expect them to be hiding? A few fringe voices suggested something even stranger, that the skulls were evidence of contact with extraterrestrials. Science eventually stripped away all of that mystique. In the 1960s, researchers at the British Museum began testing one of the skulls with advanced microscopes. They found tiny parallel striations on the teeth and other surfaces, clearly cut with modern tools. That kind of tool was completely unknown to ancient Mesoamerica. At the time, indigenous artisans worked with stone, wood, and simple abrasives, never with the steel and precision equipment used in 19th century Europe. The investigation didn't stop there, though. In the early 2000s, scientists at the Smithsonian used electron microscopy and X-ray diffraction to analyze another skull. They confirmed the same telltale marks of modern manufacturing. They also examined inclusions within the quartz itself and traced the material to quarries in Brazil and Madagascar. Ancient Central American artisans would never have had access to such sources. The conclusion, therefore, was unavoidable. The skulls were not the work of the Maya or Aztec craftsmen. They were the product of 19th and 20th century European workshops. Every tested specimen turned out to be a modern creation. The legend surrounding them collapsed under the weight of hard evidence. They were never sacred relics. They were just clever fakes designed to meet a booming demand for exotic antiquities. But of course, the myth didn't fade. In fact, the debunking only seemed to add new layers to the story. Spiritualists in the late Victorian era claimed the skulls had healing powers or stored psychic energy. These claims resurfaced in the 1970s when New Age writers connected the skulls to Atlantis, extraterrestrial civilization, and paranormal phenomena. Guys, we proved they were fake decades ago. Books, documentaries, and television specials promoted the idea that the skulls were not only ancient, but key to unlocking cosmic secrets. The legend even made its way into Hollywood. In 2008, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls put them at the center of the plot, treating them not as Mesoamerican artifacts, but as alien relics. Yes, but importantly, that is fiction. Millions of moviegoers saw the story play out on the big screen, reinforcing the myth for a new generation. The irony was obvious. The skulls had been thoroughly exposed as fakes decades earlier, yet they were still marketable as objects of mystery. So, what do the crystal skulls really show us? We're all stupid. They reveal how fascination with the exotic can open the door to fraud, and how cultural appetite can make falsehoods profitable. Yes, sir. More eloquently put. Museums wanted artifacts that told grand stories of lost civilizations. Collectors wanted relics that could impress guests and fuel conversation. Spiritualists wanted objects that could be woven into narratives of hidden power. Just add there, YouTubers wanted that they could make up videos about, but not me. Look at me. Straight up facts, yes? Skilled artisans in Europe supplied exactly what each audience demanded. The crystal skulls were not sacred objects from ancient temples in Central America. They were carved in workshops, sold through dealers, and legitimized by institutions that valued spectacle as much as science. And even when the truth came out, people chose the story over the evidence. Facts can expose a hoax, but they rarely kill it. The skulls proved to be products of the 19th century, not relics of the ancient world. Yet their legend endures because the myth satisfies something deeper than truth. It satisfies the human need for wonder. Of course, not all hoaxes were carved in crystal. Sometimes they were carved out of boring old gypsum. And that's the next entry, Cardiff Giants. In October 1869, two men were digging a well on a farm in Cardiff, New York, when a shovel struck something hard. Clearing the soil, they uncovered what looked like the foot of a 10-foot figure, every vein and muscle seemingly frozen in stone. Word instantly spread. By the end of the day, dozens of people had gathered at the site. Within hours, the giant was famous. Newspapers across upstate New York rushed to cover the discovery, while Syracuse, Rochester, and eventually New York City papers printed stories about the astonishing find. Reporters described crowds arriving by wagon, farmers abandoning their chores, and preachers delivering sermons about biblical giants. Some visitors even declared it proof that Goliath and his kin had once walked the earth. Others connected it to Onondaga, legends of stone giants. Spirits had to roam the region long before European settlement. The Cardiff farm suddenly became a carnival ground, with spectators lining up to pay 50 cents each for a glimpse. To many, this looked like a miracle carved in clay. To George Hull, it looked like a perfect con playing out exactly as he planned. Hull was a cigar maker from Binghamton with a history of dubious schemes. The idea for the Cardiff Giant came to him after a heated argument with a Methodist preacher about the literal truth of the Bible. Frustrated, Hull decided to create a fossilized man and see how easily people could be fooled. He purchased a 12-foot block of gypsum from Fort Dodge, Iowa, and had it shipped to Chicago at great expense. There, he hired 2 German stonecutters to carve a reclining figure modeled loosely on himself. However, Hull did not stop at carving. He wanted his giant to look convincingly ancient. To that end, the stone was treated with sulfuric acid and stained with ink to simulate the weathering of centuries underground. Tiny holes were drilled into the surface to mimic pores, and the figure's muscles were exaggerated to appear monumental. I was like, that's me, yes, yes. Once the work was done, Hull shipped the finished statue to New York and secretly buried it on the farm of his cousin Stub Newell in the town of Cardiff. A year later, when the Discovery was staged, everything fell into place. The scheme paid off immediately. Newell began charging admission at the site, and the money poured in. At 50 cents a head, he earned the equivalent of thousands of dollars in today's money each day. Lines of wagons stretched down the road, and enterprising locals set up food stands and souvenir stalls. Within weeks, investors offered Hull and Newell tens of thousands of dollars for a share of the attraction, which they happily accepted. The giant went on tour, traveling to Syracuse, Albany, and New York City, where it was displayed in a specially constructed tent. Even P.T. Barnum, America's master showman, wanted a part of it. When he was refused the chance to buy the original, he simply commissioned his own plaster giant, displayed it in Manhattan, and declared Hull's version a forgery. Legends. Classic Barnum. I mean, why buy a fake when you can make your own? For a time, the 2 competing giants drew crowds across the country, both loudly promoted, both complete frauds. Barnum's genius for publicity only highlighted the frenzy, proving that the spectacle mattered more than authenticity. Eventually, experts caught on to the con, though. Geologists noted the giant was carved from gypsum, a material that does not petrify human flesh. Sculptors pointed out the unmistakable marks of chisels on the surface. Andrew D. White, the co-founder and later president of Cornell University, publicly argued that the location itself was suspect. There was no reason to dig a well where the body was supposedly found. By 1870, the Cardiff giant was widely accepted as a hoax. But by then, Hull had already made his point and his profit. He later admitted to masterminding the fraud and even expressed a certain pride in how completely people had been taken in. His confession did little to dim the public's affection for the story. Instead of fading into embarrassment, the Cardiff giant became a piece of American folklore. The figure still exists today, housed at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, New York. Visitors continue to stop and marvel at the colossal fake, not as evidence of giants, but as a window into the people's appetite for spectacle. It never proved that giants roamed the earth, but it did prove something else. Belief and curiosity could turn carved stone into gold. The Piltdown Man, brought to you by the Wizard of Sussex. In the early 1900s, Charles Dawson, a Sussex lawyer with a reputation for digging up curiosities, claimed his greatest find yet. His knack for producing Roman tiles, medieval pottery, and fossil oddities earned him the nickname the Wizard of Sussex. At Barkham Manor, he presented fragments of a skull and a heavy jawbone with teeth intact. To Dawson and Arthur Smith Woodward of the British Museum, the meaning was clear. They had discovered the earliest Englishman. The timing couldn't have been better. Germany had Heidelberg Man, France had artistic Neanderthals, and Britain wanted its own evolutionary milestone. The thick skull fragments looked human, the jaw more ape-like, and together they seemed to confirm the missing link. Newspapers celebrated the find, and national pride carried it into classrooms and textbooks. For decades, Piltdown Man stood as a testament to English anthropology. But the cracks were always there. They were just in the skull. Some anatomists noted the bones did not quite fit. The skull leaned too human, the jaw too ape-like. Still, Dawson's reputation and Woodward's authority silenced those bloody doubters. When Dawson died in 1916, Woodward spent the rest of his life defending Piltdown as genuine. It took 40 years for the illusion to collapse. In 1953, a team led by Kenneth Oakley and Joseph Weiner re-examined the bones. Under the microscope, they found filling marks on the teeth. X-rays showed no signs of healing, proving that the alterations were made after death. Chemical analysis revealed staining with iron and acid to fake age. The skull turned out to be medieval, only a few centuries old, and the jaw came from, wait for it, an orangutan. Together, they had fooled the world for decades. The fallout was immense. Piltdown Man had slowed the acceptance of genuine early fossils from Africa and Asia, twisting the story of human origins. It also showed how pride and bias could cloud scientific judgment. England wanted its missing link, and experts just saw what they wanted to see. As for the culprit, all evidence points back to Dawson. He was the only constant presence at the site, and later forensic analysis matched his other suspicious finds to the same hand. The Wizard of Sussex turned out to just be a wizard of forgery. Piltdown Man remains another one of science's most famous hoaxes. It never filled a gap in human evolution. What it revealed instead was how even skilled scientists can be blinded by ambition, rivalry, and the promise of prestige. The Kensington runestone. In 1898, Olaf Oman, a Swedish immigrant farmer in Douglas County, Minnesota, was clearing trees when he uncovered a buried slab. Weighing around 200 pounds, the stone carried an inscription in runes. It described 8 Gotalanders, people from Gotland in southern Sweden, and 22 Norsemen making camp in the region in 1362, only to return from fishing and find 10 companions dead. At the bottom was the date, 1362, and if true, that was going to change everything. Centuries before Columbus, Viking explorers could have been deep in North America, not only on the coastlines. For Scandinavian settlers in Minnesota, it was more than possible, it was thrilling. The stone quickly became a point of pride, proof that their ancestors had reached the continent long before Columbus ever set sail. Perhaps one day a professional football league would have a team named after the Minnesota Vikings, which happened, but not until 1961. As far as the runestone, scholars were, shall we say, a touch skeptical. Why would a lone runestone appear in rural Minnesota when nearly every genuine example had been found in Scandinavia? Linguists soon noticed problems. The inscription resembled 19th century Swedish more than 14th century Norse. Words like Opdagelsafard, intended to mean exploratory journey, simply did not exist in medieval language. Even the grammar matched the speech of recent immigrants more than that of medieval Vikings. Arguments dragged on for decades. Supporters pointed to obscure rune forms and claimed parallels in Scandinavia. Skeptics countered with consistent linguistic and historical evidence that the text was modern. By the mid-20th century, most experts agreed that the Kensington runestone was a hoax. And yet, like the others on this list, it never faded away. Since 1958, it has been displayed at the Runestone Museum in Alexandria in Minnesota, where it remains a tourist draw. For many Scandinavian Americans, it became less about literal history and more about cultural identity, linking old traditions with new lives in America. The lesson's straightforward. America has long embraced grand tales of pre-Columbian explorers. The Kensington runestone delivered exactly that, not as a medieval artifact, but as a 19th century creation that captured pride and imagination. The Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin may be the most controversial piece of cloth in history. To some, it is sacred. To others, it's a medieval forgery, and for centuries, the arguments have never stopped. To millions of pilgrims, the faint image on the fabric is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, miraculous evidence of the resurrection. But history does not place the cloth in the 1st century. Its first appearance comes in the mid-1300s when Bishop Pierre d'Arcis of Troyes accused local clergy of displaying a painted cloth as a holy relic. According to his memorandum to the Pope, the very artist admitted to creating it. For an object supposedly central to Christian history, the silence of earlier centuries is striking. It was the image itself that raised more doubts. The arms appear unusually long, the body too tall for a man of 1st century Judea, and the hair falls straight as if the figure were standing, not lying flat. Instead of anatomical accuracy, the figure looks closer to artistic convention than to biology. The supposed bloodstains do no better. Real blood turns brown with age and does not flow in neat painted rivulets. Chemical analysis by Walter McCrone in the 1970s found that the stains were vermilion pigment mixed with gelatin, a common medieval paint medium. Tests also showed the cloth had been repositioned multiple times, more like a prop than a burial shroud. Other details point to the Middle Ages. The familiar crown of thorns with sharp spikes does not match biblical accounts, which describe a leafy wreath. That version only appears in European art centuries later. The linen itself is woven in a herringbone pattern with a twist not known in antiquity, but common in medieval Europe. But the most decisive evidence came in 1988 when radiocarbon dating placed the fabric firmly between 1260 and 1390 CE, which was the exact period when it first appears in the record. For believers, though, none of this has diminished their devotion. The shroud still rests in Turin Cathedral and still draws millions who see it as sacred. For historians and scientists, however, the evidence points to a medieval mystical creation crafted with the skill and imagination of its own time. The Shroud of Turin does not reveal the body of Christ. What it reveals is the enduring tension between faith and science, a debate that keeps the cloth one of the most studied and argued over artifacts in history. So what ties our stories together today is not the stone, the bone, the cloth at their center, but the people who believed in them. Each artifact reflected what audiences wanted most: wisdom from a vanished civilization, proof of scripture, a missing link to rival other nations, or a heroic past to claim as their own. They thrived because science had not yet caught up. Carbon dating, microscopy, and DNA sequencing were decades away, so scholars leaned on authority, tradition, and their own biases. Hoaxes knew exactly how to exploit these blind spots. Money and prestige helped too, whether it was Barnum selling tickets or Dawson chasing scientific glory. And when the truth finally did surface, the myths didn't disappear. The Cardiff giant is still on display in New York, the Shroud still draws pilgrims to Turin, and the crystal skulls show up in books and films all the time. The Kensington runestone even got its own museum. The facts may have stripped them of authenticity, but the stories proved harder to kill. Thank you for watching.